Welcome to the next video in the Suggestion App course. This is a complete course where we'll build a .NET 6 Blazor server application with MongoDB from the ground up. There are three things you need to know before we get started. First, this is part of a series, and this isn't the first video in the series. If you're just starting out, you should check out the playlist that's linked in the description to start from the first video in the series. Second, this course is actually a paid course. MongoDB sponsored it so you can put the videos on YouTube for free. Check out the link in the description to sign up for MongoDB Atlas for free to thank them if you haven't already. Third, you can also buy this course on imtimcorey.com. The link is in the description. Buying this course will get you all the lessons right away, the source code for each lesson, a certificate of completion, offline access, and more. It also helps sponsor more free content. The video will be the same as it is on YouTube, so feel free to watch the free version if you want to. Okay, let's jump into today's video. Note there may be more than one lesson in this video, since some lessons are short. Let's start now on the HTML for this page, and we're not going to style this HTML. So it's going to look horrible, that's okay. We're just getting the content on the page inside of some pretty standardized divisions. Now, we may come back to this page at some point, maybe not in version 1. We may come back to this page at some point and try to clean it up a little bit more as far as what type of containers we use. But for the most part, we're going to stick with div on this page, and then we can again come back to this once it makes sense and adjust to a better set of values if we find that's necessary. So let's start with the header. And again, I'm not going to put classes on these at this point. I may put, for some of these, I may put, class equals to have it, but I think I'll just leave this off for now. And we're going to say training suggestions. So this is the training suggestions page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a button at the very top that says, hey, make a suggestion. So we'll put that inside of a div, and we'll say button, and we're going to say, let's just call it button, and we'll say suggest. So just note that I am using div a lot, but whenever possible, if you have a more specific type, use that. For example, I could say div here with a style of button, but I really want to have it be a button so that it's accessible and easy to find. If, I go into a lot more detail into my foundation web development course where we talk about the structure of HTML and the style of CSS and how to do the right thing for not just the people who can see, but also the people using page readers and so on to make things easier and understandable for them as well. Okay, so now we have the heading and we have the button on the page. Now let's start with another. I will put the, I'm debating if I put the Bootstrap classes on here, classes and rows. The problem with that is that we're going to adjust a lot of these things based upon whether we, what the different sizes are based upon page breaks. So I think for now I'll leave them off, but this will be a row. And we're going to have a div, and inside of here, we're going to have our @suggestions $.count. So if there are suggestions, I want the count of them, and we'll say space suggestions. So what this will be is it will say, hey, here's how many suggestions have been made. And that will be based upon this suggestions object, if it has any. If it doesn't have any, we're going to ignore that and it's going to just say suggestions. So we could probably hide this if the count was 0, but I don't think we need to go that far and have that much extra code here. Next up, we're going to have another div, and we're going to have inside of here a couple of buttons, and we'll have an onClick. And this onClick needs to to call a method and pass in a parameter. So what we're going to do is open and close parens twice. And the inner one, we're going to say arrow, and I'll say order by new, and pass in true for this first one. It will pass in false for the second one. This will be new. And we'll copy this and paste it again. This button, we're going to say false, and this is going to be popular. So this is going to be the button toggle between new or popular. We're going to style this using Bootstrap. Don't forget that with the latest version of Blazor, .NET 6, we're using the Bootstrap 5, so we can have access to all the Bootstrap stuff there. We're going to do our own custom CSS as well, but we'll take advantage of the Bootstrap stuff whenever it makes sense. So this will be styled for a toggle button. And then next up, we're going to have our search box. So we'll have an input here, and we'll say type equals text. And let's put a placeholder here of search. So whenever you are looking at it, you'll see that it's a search box. And let's add an ARIA label here. Equals search box, because we don't have an actual label for it. ARIA labels, what they allow screen readers to do is to know what type of input this is, other than just it's an input. And then we'll have on or at on input equals, and we'll have our open and close parens twice. We'll put txt inside the first one. That's a parameter. And we'll say on search input. And we'll pass in we have to cast this to a type string. It's an object right now. And we'll say txt.value. So what this does, let me close this out. What this does is it creates a input, and let's actually put it on multiple lines, like so. So this creates an input. It's a type text. This is our search box. It will say search in the placeholder, which is inside the box. And when you have input, so when you type in this thing, so every time you type a letter, it's going to take the value, the entire value of the text box, and it's going to send that to the onSearch input. Now, txt.value is an object, so we're casting that to type string, because we know it's a string text. So this allows us to, as you type in the search box, it will call that method every time you hit a letter. So that's now our search box. And I think that's going to be it for our boxes up top. So that's our first line, which has number of suggestions. We have our buttons for ordering, and we have our search box. We're going to put a couple more things on the page before we load this page to test it out. So let's actually, you know what? Let's launch this page. Let's make sure we can see something working. It's always good to have something working. Make sure we don't break anything, and that we have some type of feedback that tells us that we're doing the right thing. There we go. So we have our header. We have a button that says suggest. That'll be for creating new suggestions. We have, right now it says, if we notice here, it says 5 suggestions, because it knows we have 5 sample suggestions. If we go back to our MongoDB and we look at our suggestions list, we have, of course, 5 suggestions. We approved all of them for release, which is why we can see all 5. So there's our filtering. We can sort it by new or popular, which that's actually doing a sort, but there's nothing to show here, so that's why we don't see anything changing. We have our search box, which has that placeholder of search in it. And if we start typing here, notice it says 0 suggestions right now. I type test and nothing shows up. So if I type nothing now, it says 5 suggestions. If I type FO for fourth, there's 1 suggestion that's a 4th suggestion. But there's 3 suggestions that have an F in them, because there's 1st, 4th, and 5th. So second, one suggestion. And notice casing doesn't matter. So if I were to say capital D at the end, no big deal, it doesn't matter. So we've got something working. It's actually working correctly. It is ugly, but that's okay. We don't care about looks right now. What we care about is that it works. And that was an error real quick. Sorry, I closed it out for you. But I've been having errors with the edit and continue. Part of that is how much I abuse edit and continue. So when you're making massive changes to your code, especially any kind of asynchronous code or startup code, that causes problems with your edit and continue or the hot reload. So I've had those problems. It's been a little weird. But when you're doing CSS changes, which we'll be doing later, the hot reload is awesome and it's usually helpful. Now, a separate CSS file that will be that causes some problems for the hot reload. So just know that hot reload's there. It's not perfect, especially not for Blazor because so much is going on. One of the problems of Blazor is there is so much going on, the tooling has a hard time keeping up. Because, for example, on this page, we're mixing dependency injection and we're mixing HTML and CSS and C# inline and all this stuff. And it's trying to do IntelliSense and IntelliCode, and it just gets a lot of stuff wrong because it's got so much going on and it makes bad assumptions. Trying to do hot reload can be even more challenging. So this is not a simple page. Therefore, hot reload struggles a bit at times, but that's okay. We'll use the tools as they're available, and as they get better, we will enjoy them even more. But for now, just note that you may have some problems with hot reload. It happens. All right, this is another row, and this will be the first set of columns in that row. And in here, we're going to say if suggestions is not null. So if you have suggestions, then we're going to start displaying those suggestions. But what happens, like right now we have 5 suggestions, no big deal. So you can do a for each, we can display all 5, be great, be fast, be efficient. But what if we have, 2,000 suggestions? Well, we probably don't want to display all 2,000 on the page. And when we do display them, and we're monitoring each one of them for on-click events, for the upvoting, and for going into details, that gets very, very expensive. And trust me, I know because I loaded 2,000 plus, actually 5,000 at one point, records into my test of this site. So what we want to do is use a newer keyword that's in Blazor called Virtualize. And what Virtualize does is it allows us to not have to do paging. Because another option is paging, where you say, okay, only give me the first page, and then you hit the next for the next page and it loads the next set of suggestions. That isn't as great as it sounds when you start doing filtering and sorting and all the rest. It gets a little ugly. But you can do it. It's fine. It works. It's tried and true. But Virtualize allows us to have a infinitely scrolling list. Now, it's not infinite. It's however many elements you have. So say 2,000. Well, we could scroll through all 2,000, but it's only ever going to render the ones that are on the page itself plus a few extra. That way, you're rendering, once we get this layout done, we'll be rendering about 5 to 8 suggestions on a page at a time. So double that for the pre-render, and we're talking 16, 20 suggestions being rendered at any one point, even though we have 2,000 in our list. That makes for a much more performant site. So we're going to virtualize. We're going to say that items equals at suggestions. That's the items to loop over. Think of this like a for each. We're going to say context equals, and this is the variable name we give it. We're going to say s. So what this variable name does is in the for each where we have the individual items, we say var, S in suggestions, this would be the S. This is the variable per suggestion. And we also have overscan count. And this is the number of elements we want to overscan. Let's say 10. And so what we have here, whoops, there we go, is this will render only the elements that actually show on the page plus 10. And why the plus 10? Well, because when you scroll, you don't want to have it reload and reload and reload and have this lag time. So we have an overscan of 10 so that as you scroll, they've already been rendered down below, but then as you scroll up, it renders the next ones in line below that so that it feels like it's a continual scroll without any lag or very little lag, and yet behind the scenes it's doing a lot of loading. Now with this Virtualize, we're going to load the entire list into memory. This is how we're going to do it for version 1. If we find that we have an issue where we just have too many suggestions and so we can't load them all into memory, well, then what we'll do is we'll use Virtualize to, instead of just rendering the next ones, it's going to go and get the next ones and then render them. So essentially, it'll do paging for us. But I don't think we need that for now. So in here we have a div. Inside this div, we'll have another div that has a onClick. And that will be equal to vote up, which we don't have that method yet. So we'll need to get that method in place. Let's find out where that method is. I see we don't have it in place. We're going to take it out for now. This is going to be the vote up on click method, but we don't have the vote up method yet because of the fact that you can't vote without being logged in. So we're going to wait to do the voting until after we're logged in. So just note this method, this div will have that onClick event, but then this is going to be the left-hand side. This is the side that has the little arrow. It has number of votes or click to upvote. So we're going to have first the div, no class. We're going to have, it's classless, at get upvote top text and pass in our S. So it's going to be the top text for our upvoting. Then we're going to have a span, which has, I will put a class here. This is OI and OI dash caret dash top. And I'm not sure why that said pointer event. These are classes that will create for us a little arrow. So this is the built-in icons for Bootstrap. We can use our own if we want. We can use different ones, but we're going to use the built-in stuff because I want to keep this as simple as possible. So this is just a little up arrow that we can use to represent the upvote, and we'll make that bigger eventually. But for right now, this is fine. And we'll have a div where we say at get upvote bottom text and pass in again the suggestion. So this is now the top text, which is going to say click to. This is the bottom text, which is going to say upvote, or it's going to say 04 for the number of votes, and then down here it'll say upvotes. So in between will be that arrow. That is the first section. And then the next section, we're going to have a div here with a onClick equals to open details for the suggestion. And then inside of this, we'll say at s.suggestion. So we're going to have the actual suggestion entry here, where this will say this is a suggestion. And if you click on it, we're going to open the details for this suggestion. Next up, we're going to have down here another div. There's a lot of divs in here. That's what you get when you're trying to lay things out well. So we're going to have this be another open details. So we're going to have the on-click for this as well, be the same thing. And what that's going to do is, so in here, div, there we go. What this will be is the category. So at s.category name. We can put that just in case it doesn't have a category, it should. But in case it doesn't have a category, we'll just say, if it has one, put the name. So what this does is we have this on-click for the suggestion, the title of this, where we say, hey, here's my suggestion. But also we're going to have down in the bottom, it'll say the category of our suggestion. But I want that to be clickable as well. Now, we're going to do more stuff with this. We're going to have the option to also put down here an archive entry, but we'll get to that once we get to our ability to have admins. So that gives us this is essentially the middle of if you call this a pill or whatever it is for the suggestion entry. On the left-hand side, we have our vote button. On the middle, we have our suggestion, and the bottom says the category name. On the right-hand side, we have potentially a little section that says, hey, here is the status of this. So let's create that. And this will be a status section. So we'll have a div in here with at s.suggestion status, if there is one, dot status name. And that will end our virtualize component. So again, let's run this again to see how it looks and see what we've got going on here. Wait for it to load. And again, I'm not going to use hot reload to show this multiple times, but we have 5 suggestions. Notice on the left-hand side, let's zoom in here a little bit. Notice this has 4 upvotes. Okay, then it's our 5th suggestion. Whoops, sorry, nothing. I clicked on it. If you click on here or on other, both of these will take you to that particular detail, which notice, by the way, says /details, and then it has that GUID that identifies, actually not a GUID, but it's a unique identifier that identifies that particular suggestion. Now you don't have a page here yet, no big deal. So it's been marked as dismissed. So that's our entire section. We have what's going to be the left-hand side, 04, the up arrow and upvotes. The middle section, our 5th suggestion, and other for the category. And the right-hand side is going to say dismissed. And we have all 5 of our entries here. If we were to search for 4th, notice we have 1 suggestion now. It has 3 upvotes, and it's our 4th suggestion with a 10-minute training suggestion. And it's been marked as upcoming. So that's our page. We actually have something working after a fashion. Let's go back and clear this out. We can now vote by or search by popular or by new. It doesn't change a lot because of our ordering here, but it should be ordering things based upon its popularity and based upon its creation date, which unfortunately is the same right now. But we can change that once we get these votes hooked up and so on. So it is working. We've got the Virtualize working. We're pretty much good to go on this section. But now this right here, this div is going to be a row. This is going to take up 2/3 of the page. The left-hand 2/3 will be our suggestions. On the right-hand third, this is where we're going to list out our categories and statuses. So if categories is not null. So you have categories. Then we're going to say div. This is a bug I've noticed. Okay, let me try and replicate this again. So I want to put a div in here, and it's inside of an if statement, which is C#. But now this is switching back to HTML, and I say div, and I close the div. It does not give me the closing div for that open div. So I try to close the div manually like this, and I put the greater than sign, the end of my angle bracket, and notice what happens to this div. It took off the slash. So there's a bug there. We're getting that fixed. Hopefully, I'm not the one fixing it, but I reported it, and we're gonna get this hopefully straightened out eventually. But just know if you see that and you go, hey, wait, my HTML is not rendering properly, check to see if it hasn't taken this slash off accidentally for you. It's a quirky little thing that I'm hoping gets fixed pretty soon. So first we have a span, and we're going to say category. And then we have a div, and we're going to say on click equals, and we'll put in quotes, our open and close parentheses. We're going to do this a lot. Normally you just put the method name in here if you're just going to call a method directly. But since I'm calling methods with parameters, I have to do this, this action. So I'm going to say arrow, and I'll say on category click, like so. And I'm not going to pass in anything here. So I'll have slash div. And again, it took that slash off. So this is going to first list the all, which we don't have a category called all. So we're going to manually put one in here, and we're not passing anything in here. We could pass in all like this. We don't need to, because of the fact that we have that as a default. And now we can say at for each var c in categories. And then in here, we can say div, and then we'll have a at on click equals our arrow, and say on category click. And then inside of here, we'll say c.category name. And that will allow us to have that category name pass through as this is the filter. And then we'll say close out the opening part of that div. We'll say at c.category name to display the same name. And then we'll say slash div. I'm going to escape out of here and close the div out. That does solve our problem. It doesn't take away the closing slash if you get rid of IntelliSense there. So what's this doing? It's going to list every category. It's going to display the category name, and if you click on the category name, it's going to use that as the filter. So it's going to have the on category click. It's going to change the category name to be this category name, and then it will filter all of our records based upon that. So that's the listing for our categories. Now we're going to have the same exact pattern if statuses is not null. And then inside here, we're going to have our list of statuses. So let's just copy and paste this so we can avoid that, that bug with the closing div. And we'll say status for our span. And then I don't know why it's doing weird colors. I'm not sure why. It is what it is. On status click instead of on category click. And we will say on status click here and c dot, actually it's statuses. I probably should have just copy and pasted this, or not copy and pasted this. It's s dot status name. and it's s.statusName. So same pattern, just with status instead of categories. So if statuses are not null, I want you to put a status section where we're going to have first and all, and then we're going to list every element and say that if you click it, it's going to change that status name, and that we're going to list each of the status names. So let's run this again just so we can see it. Wait for it to load. Okay, so we're zoomed in here a little bit, but here's our suggestions. And then down below, we have category. And we have all, we have courses, dev questions, in-depth tutorial, 10-minute training, other. Then we have status, and the same thing, all completed, watching, upcoming, dismissed. So notice that this second suggestion is a dev question. Let's click on dev question. Notice we only have one suggestion now because we clicked on dev question. If I click on all again, now I have 5 suggestions. If I come down here to completed and click it, we only have one suggestion, and it is our second suggestion. And notice I went back. Notice I click on this, go, oops, nope, and go back. I still only have one suggestion because it's remembering the filter. It's remembering what the filter was and say, okay, no problem. I'll go ahead and set this filter up again. So with that, we can go back to all courses and all statuses and get all 5 back. So the page works, and this is the vast majority of all of the data we want on this page. There is a lot of styling to do, but this page works. And that's the first step in this HTML design. I always recommend you design your HTML first. Get the structure in place. Then worry about styling. Because if you just worry about styling as you go, you may create this ugly design that's not really structurally sound. You want to think in terms of building blocks and build your page up that way, and then you want to style it to make it look the way you want. Right now, this looks horrible. We're going to get there and make it look better, but we have data on the page. The page does work. The temptation is to start doing some little styling here to make it kind of separate itself and look a little better. But I think we'll wait on doing that. The page is laid out properly. We can now move on to the other pages, get those rendering at least, and get the content on the page. Then we can come back and work through styling it and also bring in our authentication as well so we can get the rest of the content on these pages properly, get them looking right, and then get them working with the entire flow. So let's just get the structure in place first. All right. So this page is done. Now yes, edit and continue is currently unavailable due to an internal error. Happens a lot. Part of it may be my machine and what I've got going on, but part of it is just how I'm stressing it out. So that page is done. We can close all. The page is done. We now have our index page working properly. We can now move on to the other pages and get those structures in place.